What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a very serious video about my top 5 lists. Because, like my father before me and his father before him, I have to farm that YouTube algorithm to stave off my fears of having to go back to a real job. And thus, every once in a while, I've got to put out something like this to really capture that attention. And if you've watched the channel at all, I do love a good list. So the logical next step there is to instead make lists about my favorite lists in a sort of infinite content farm. So naturally, I thought I would do just that and talk about some of the lists that filled me with the most joy to make and filled my pockets with the most amount of ad revenue. Speaking of which though, first off, before we dive fully into the video, a quick note from our sponsor, Generic VPN. Getting down to brass tacks about it, there's two reasons you might need a VPN. You're paranoid about somebody spying on you despite knowing full well you're not interesting enough for anyone to care to do that. Or two, you want to access content that is not available in your country. In either of those two cases, Generic VPN can help you out, which you can check out in the link in the description below. Unfortunately though, you will only be able to see that link provided the government isn't actively tracking you. Sorry, I don't make the rules. And with that out of the way, let's actually dive fully into this video. Our first entry of my favorite top 5s isn't a top 5 at all, but rather a top 7 because I actually do make the rules and I can do whatever I want. That top 7 being my favorite CRPGs. I do love to cover CRPGs, they're my favorite genre of game, so naturally people are pretty interested in which ones are my favorites. So every time a new big CRPG comes out, people will get curious if it manages to land on the rankings at all, which means I get to update this video when things like Baldur's Gate 3 or Rogue Trader release, and it's always a fun time that captures people's attention. Our second entry is my top 5 worst parts of my favorite games. Because despite them being my favorite games, the human attention span tends to focus on negativity much more than positivity, which means two things. It's fun to complain about these things, but also it's great for that YouTube algorithm money. And that list accomplishes both of those things at the same time. Keeping it moving though, we then have number 3, which is the top 5 100% I enjoyed the most. As I review after 100% mini games, a lot of people are interested in which ones I had fun with, and given the fact that a lot of them have at least one tedious part, I often get questions about which part of that process has been fun in terms of which games I've played, etc., and I'm always happy to answer people's questions in the form of an exclusive list video. Keeping that exact same frame of mind, however, we then have our number 4 entry, which is the top 5 100% I gave up on. Pretty much the same thing in reverse. There are some games occasionally that I just decide I'm not going to finish. And given that my whole channel's thing is about reviewing games after that point, a video on the games I couldn't be bothered to do that with is always an attention grabber. And one thing I can tell you about us YouTubers, we do love to grab attention. Which brings us to number 5, our final entry, and this just so happens to be my 5 favorite playthroughs of Baldur's Gate 3. A game I played through a dozen times, which is just enough times to form a top 5 that's actually a little bit mysterious. And my favorite thing about this list isn't the list itself, but rather the many comments I got being surprised that I played through the game enough times to have a top 5 favorites, which I assure you gave me a feeling of power that could only be replicated through what I'm sure would be illicit means. And that just about wraps this video up, answering everyone's burning questions about my top 5s, a question I'm pretty sure no one has actually asked me, but using my astute powers of observation as a master of all things list video, I knew this one needed to be done. And it definitely has no relation to what day it is, so definitely don't check your calendar about it. But that is going to pretty much wrap this particular video up. Do let me know what you think about it. Hopefully you enjoyed it, maybe got a laugh, and if you'd like to see me farm the content algorithm even farther, do like, subscribe, comment, and stick around. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you. May you wander in wisdom, and have an amazing day.